I wanted to swing back on, you mentioned in the book you were 25, freshly minted MBA. You're just a young pup, wet behind, still wet behind the ears. And what is your advice for young leaders, people who step into these roles without a lot of real world experience, and they got challenges? What is your advice?
Mentorship and listen. I think my story is very instructive, very instructive. While I was at business school, I had the opportunity to look at the company from afar, to write papers. I took a course in business strategy, and I took a course in retailing. Retailing gave me the opportunity to write papers, and the strategy course gave me an understanding of the importance of having a correct aiming point. And so when I came to the job, that was the skills and the orientation enough for the team and I to fix what was wrong. The problem is that it's hard to put an experienced, savvy head on a young body. And that set the seeds for what I would call a massive sophomore slump in the next 5 years. And this is where the lesson comes in, and it answers your question. Is basically, after all that success, we were growing earnings at 50% compounded. We were the darling of Wall Street. For a business that my dad couldn't sell for $1.5 million, I was sitting on a business that was worth $150 million in market cap within 5 years, growing dramatically, and began to start to think, well, I've got to keep this multiple up, keep the stock price up. And I took my eye off basically the business, the franchisees, my team, and started to think about, if I could do that well with one franchise business, maybe we could do it with many. And it all went for the next 5 years. Earnings stagnated. Franchisees were dissatisfied. 8 of them sued the company. My best friend that I had hired from business school, who had gone to work for Goldman, had come as my CFO, left because he felt he couldn't follow my leadership. He lost confidence in me. It was a sad, sad, sad time. And I had a transformational moment in the midst of all of this sadness and shame and failure, and basically did a 180 and began to grow. Now in the common lexicon is with some emotional intelligence. But basically reading a book called The Best and the Brightest, David Halberstam's book about the Johnson and Kennedy's administration of the Vietnamese War. The country's Ivy Leaguers and best and brightest suffered from what he called hubris, which is the Greek word for arrogance. And my God, I can tell you that there was like a strike of lightning that just struck me in the mid-70s, where I said, oh my goodness, he could be talking about me. And that's when it really dawned on me what my role was as a leader, how much there was to be gained by listening to others, by putting into place processes and policies and procedures to ensure that that kind of wrong aiming point doesn't occur willy-nilly again in the future. A lot more thoughtful with the board, and created an advisory council of franchisees where an awful lot of the wisdom of the system existed. I traveled to 100 stores here, each of us, all of the senior management team. We decided that we would never blame our followership. We would always take 100% of the responsibility for the well-being of the system. It's not 50-50, it's not 60-40, it's 100-0. That's our job. We can invite a lot of people in to help us. And by God, the franchisees, when we apologized for what we did and invited them in to fix it, they were more than willing to help, and help they did. But so by virtue of that string of a 10-year existence, a 10-year history of immense success, that success leading to a barrier for future success, and the emotional awakening of my role as a leader, and the importance of humility, and the importance of listening, and the importance of slowing down, and the importance of your role as a leader in getting strategy right, were all things that I think would help other young people going into business and finding themselves in this very unique position, a lot of responsibility at a young age. I didn't come grown up, unfortunately. I wish I had, but that's not the way the world works, and the world can be lumpy. But you can learn more if you can survive it from a setback than you can from success. Success is a dangerous thing if you have too much of it. You really can start believing your own press. That's dangerous.
Yes. You mentioned a 10-year kind of timeline there. Is that when you were about 35 is what you're saying? And things sort of,
25, I took over in 63. This happened in 73. I also got fired. Luckily, I read the book and had my wake up moment before. And the board said, business is stagnant. You got all these problems. You got litigation. We've had just about enough of you. We suggest you find your own replacement. I said, I don't think that's my job to find a replacement. But let me tell you, the team and I think we understand what we did wrong. We think we can slow down the rate of growth. We can put our arms around the business. Give us another quarter to show we're right.
yes.
I left the room for, I don't know, it seemed like an eternity, but it was about 2 hours. And basically I came back and said, okay, we'll give you another quarter. Let's reconvene and see if in fact you really have this, nailed, if you really do understand what you did wrong, and if you in fact have corrected it. And I believed to my very core when I made the pitch, I wasn't blowing smoke. I mean, I really believed in my team. I believe we really did know the difference. I thought I was growing up and learning what was important. And as a result of that, we were on our way. And quite truthfully, for the next 25 years, we never really looked back. And it was a little bit like a kid putting his hand on a hot stove. That doesn't feel so good. I don't want to do that again.
No, right. Well, that whole experience that you describe in the book about the board spending, some private time deciding whether you were going to stay. I mean, that is a very humbling and stressful kind of moment in a person's life.
Yes, it is. But
Wow.
it was deserved. I mean, in other words, it wasn't out of the blue. It wasn't capricious. It was true. I mean, basically, I had lost the way, and I was driving franchisees and their businesses and the employees and the staff almost to the edge of a cliff. And someone had to take action, and that's the job of a board. They have to take action. So I don't blame them for it. Luckily, we got to see it in Halberstam. My brother has a saying. It's a wonderful saying. It's often happened in my life. He said, when the student is ready, a teacher will appear. And thank God that in this case, David Halberstam in his book appeared for me and helped me.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm so thankful to hear you talk about this. I wanted to ask you about your how you are different, and how leadership changed you over the years. And you talked about humility as one of the, you start off kind of full of piss and vinegar and, ready to go, and kind of cocky. And 10 years later, you're learning the lesson, learning. You didn't, I don't know if you ever learn humility, but you're learning it. So what's different about you as a result of your leadership journey?
I think basically it's the openness to realize that there's a lot more to learn, and it's a continuing journey. It was transformational in terms of the important element that struck me, but it continues on to this very day. It could be a seminar. It could be another book. A friend of mine here on Martha's Vineyard, Rosenberg wrote a book called Think Outside the Building. And I was reading that book, not because I thought I needed it, but because she was a friend of mine. And I thought that, and she's always had a lot to say and important things. And it provoked in me a whole new thinking about what I will do next and what's my next dream, and the importance of a dream and the importance of having something to energize you to get up. So it's just a long journey and process. Hopefully I'll never be baked. I mean, there's always something to learn. My children teach me things all the time, particularly in this new era. The world, you could say, in some ways, the world is moving so fast. I rely upon them for all my computer savvy. I have to learn how to be in touch on Zoom with you. It's just never ends. It's a constant process, and if there is a fountain of youth, I think that may be it. Have a dream and don't ever stop. Keep on swimming. Keep growing.
So you would say, I mean, you were a learner before, but I think the education is different, right? I mean, you went to school, you went to Harvard, you got you got an education, but there's something different, that happens over those next 10 years after you took over. It is an education, but it's not exactly book learning.
No, it's as I tell my children, life is lumpy and business is lumpy. And I find that my best learning occurs when I hit one of those bumps in the road. That I am more open then. I realize that there's more to learn, there's more to know, there's someone to learn from. So if I attend a seminar, and I'd gone to seminars, my discussions with colleagues, I have mentors. Basically, as I go through those periods, I find in those conversations I get 1, 2, maybe 3 nuggets that are useful, and it's almost invariably the nugget deals with the issue that I'm wrestling with at the particular moment, where I'm really having problems, or I've reached an impasse, where I don't know. I'm coming from a position of not knowing. One of the things that was helpful to me was something that I had read or heard from a philosopher and a physicist by the name of Niels Bohr. Niels Bohr said, there are 2 kinds of truths in the world. There's the small truth, and that's easy to see because on the other side of that is a lie. But then there's the big truth, and that's a lot harder to see because on the other side of that is another truth. And you need to have a belief system and set of values and other things in order to live your life effectively throughout. But you also have to be open to the notion that there are other truths evolving, that we're uncovering them all the time. And we're not necessarily prepared to understand all that, but be prepared when it comes to be able to change your mind, to be open to another truth, to a big truth. I don't know if that helps, but yeah, that's all part of the journey, I think.
Yes. Yeah. What I'm hearing you talk about, humility, openness, and let's face it, sometimes it's the bumps that create openness, right? It's success closes our mind, it solidifies our thinking.
Absolutely.
And failure kind of opens the mind a little bit, and like, aha.
It's alive. If one of the seminars I took was it's been debunked or laughed at, but it was called EST. And I found the one thing that stuck in my mind was that as you go through life, they try to pry your fingers off the rearview mirror. You can't steer your vehicle of your own life through your hands on the rearview mirror. They pry them off finger by finger and put it on the steering wheel. And that was a powerful imagery for me. In terms of, I'm the master of that. Stop blaming anybody else. What is my responsibility in the matter? And that's where I start. What's my responsibility in the matter? If there are issues in the family, if there are issues in relationships, if there are issues in the country I want to fix, what's my responsibility in the matter?
Yes. Now, there's such a shift that happens. It's like I'm so worried about what you need to do and what's wrong with you, and I'm looking out at these other people and I'm kind of pointing fingers at them. That's one way to look at life, and the other way is like, what am I doing that's creating this response? What am I doing that's causing this situation? And ow.
That's exactly, ouch is right. That's the first reaction is ouch, but in a saner moment, as you live with it, as it stews in your brain, you then begin to start to see opportunity. And so long as you don't get overwhelmed by shame is, I think, one of the big killers. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to grow. It's okay to acknowledge that you had this problem and that you're working on it or you solved it. As a matter of fact, it's a sign of strength, and it's helpful to everybody around you. And that's a kind of a philosophy that's been helpful for me. And believe me, I've kicked a lot of stones.
You remind me, I had a conversation with a chief security officer for Microsoft. He's retired now, but he said, you have to have the courage to ask the dumb question. It all speaks to this idea of image and, I've got it all together, and you just have to ask a stupid question sometimes.
Absolutely. Coming from not knowing is sometimes a lot better than coming from knowing. Yeah. I mean, some of the mistakes I made with consultants pop into my mind as you said that. I would go to them and say, develop me a Willy Wonka machine that will make donuts in the back room better than what we currently do, so we don't have to rely on donut men. And so being so prescriptive and having the answer was a limitation. It never worked out, and I had to write off a lot of money to learn that. But had I come and said, just find me a better production system, and without a prescription would have been a lot better, coming from not knowing what the answer was. I've done that a couple of times with consultants, and it's really not worked out well. Coming from a position, a much more broader, higher level conceptual position, gets me a lot better results.